Hi y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Yuna, and on this channel I talk about fashion, tech, beauty, all sorts of things. I'm so excited to have you here. If you are new to this channel, please hit subscribe below and also hit the notification bell so you can get all of the updates for the videos that I'm going to put out there. If you like this video, please also give it a big thumbs up so that other people can find this video. That's kind of how they start to trend and get on the recommended videos for other people. So please do that if you like this video. I would really appreciate it. I'm pretty new to YouTube. I'm actually super brand new. So if you have a chance, just show some love to your fellow techies or just fellow YouTubers and hit that like and subscribe button. Today I'm going to be talking about where should I work in tech? This is sort of just a video about all the different types of places that you can work and some of the pros and cons between them. We are really lucky that this field gives us so many opportunities. So if you're graduating now, you might be wondering, which opportunity should I take? Or if you're looking for a job, you might be wondering, which field should I be looking into? How can I best pose myself to be in that industry? You might just be curious about tech in general and you want to hear about the different types of opportunities, the different types of jobs and workplaces that are out there. I have worked at a variety of places. I've worked at very small startups. I've worked at very big companies. I worked at IBM. It doesn't really get much bigger than that. I was working on Watson. I was working on Bluemix. Before that, I was working at a startup called Invite, which is now a part of Eventbrite. They were acquired by Eventbrite. It was a very small team doing a platform for events. I've also worked at agencies. I worked at an agency called Include. I worked at an agency. My very first job was at a place called MOS Creative, where I learned a ton about code. I just had a lot of different experiences. I've even worked in-house at a college at my university. Then I worked at sort of mid to large size growing startups. I worked at places that have doubled in size in a year and a half since I started working there. I used to work at a cloud platform company, so that was definitely like back-end heavy, but we were still doing front-end things for the UI. And now I work at also a mid-sized company. So on that team, it's interesting because it's a very small engineering team, but a pretty mid-sized company, and it's also still in the startup phases. So I have had a lot of different experiences in my tech career as a front-end developer. I've been doing just web dev code, so that's CSS, JavaScript, HTML, front-end code. Also have worked with frameworks. I have had experience building design systems. I've really done a lot of work also in the field between design and engineering, usually working on engineering teams, being like the engineer amongst designers, sometimes being a designer focused person among engineers as well. That's sort of my current job. So I've seen like a pretty big spectrum. So yeah, let's just get started. I know that was a bit of a background about me, but I think it's important for you to understand my perspective and where I'm coming from so that you can understand where my advice could fall short and also about the experiences that I have. In this video, I want to talk about small versus large companies and also about product versus agency work. And at the end, I am going to give a little bit of advice for you if you are just graduating school from computer science or for digital design and are starting your first job, so that you can have just a little bit of advice, things that might help you with the rest of your career. So let's start with talking about smaller companies. Now with small companies, you do have more control and impact over your individual projects. And that means that you also have a lot more responsibility, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I think it's actually really great to have a lot more control because you get to make a lot of the decisions, whether that be a technical decision or a design decision or an architecture decision, and that's very empowering. Small teams also tend to move faster than larger teams. Small companies can really be a place to shine and to show your team what you're capable of. With small companies, you tend to learn about each other's pros and cons, and you'll have people that you can turn to ask questions and to work with, and you'll know what their specialties are. With larger companies, it might be harder to reach out and find those people. You might be in different departments, different cities, but in smaller companies, you tend to have to fill all the roles that you need for an engineering team, everything from back end to front end to design, everything in between. So you get to know a little bit about the entire process, more so than you would if you're working at a large company on a very specific task. If you have a chance to apprentice or intern at a small company, I think this is great because you will probably get support from a variety of people. You'll have your mentor, and then maybe some other people that are surrounding that mentor project will have a chance to also help you. This can also be true in large companies. I've personally experienced this in small companies. I interned at a small agency called Viget, and it was in Alexandria, Virginia, and I loved that experience. I got to really learn about everyone's process and their decisions. It was such an open environment. We all made decisions together out loud, just like in a room together. And I got to learn about how people work in a very open way. When I was there, I remember they all learned Backbone together. There was like a little Fed, like front end movie sort of meetup there where everyone on the team, there was like 8 people on the team. They're like all back end and front end. There were 4 front end developers at the time in the location that I was at. They actually do have multiple cities. But I love that experience of learning together and going through videos and then like doing your homework. So that was a very cool environment to grow in. I've also worked at smaller companies, at startups, and this idea that you're not gonna learn as much is so untrue. You're probably working with some really smart people. If 4 people can support an entire engineering team, those are some really intelligent engineers. So take that time to really learn from the people around you. I think small teams are wonderful environments to really learn, to teach, to grow. There's a lot of camaraderie amongst small teams. Okay, so now let's talk about larger companies. As I said earlier, the biggest company that I worked at was IBM, and it was a machine. At the time, they were flying in groups of 60 people to train together and to go through this entire sort of boot camp process. The larger companies definitely have a massive advantage in that they give you a platform from which to speak to the rest of the world. You can be working on products that affect so many people. This can also be true for smaller companies too, by the way. At large companies, there are a lot of people to learn from as well that have a variety of different backgrounds and skill sets. So definitely more people to learn from than from small companies. And it all really comes down to you making the time and effort to get to know them. It's a little bit harder to learn about people's specialties at larger companies, or at least it tends to be, so you kind of have to like Slack people and get to know them, but that can be super rewarding to get to know as many of your coworkers as you can. A big company can really boost your career because they give you a name brand. Like, as much as I don't want to say that, I think that one of the things that really helped me to start speaking as a tech speaker was the fact that I could put IBM in my little bio line. And it also it gives you a platform. If you make a name for yourself and make a voice for yourself in this large company, that can really set you up for a lot of success in the tech world. And large companies tend to have been around for a while as well, so they probably have it together in terms of like getting your 401k. And so I think large companies are a very good learning ground into the professional world. They really vary, like companies definitely vary, so take any advice I'm giving you with a grain of salt, but you will absolutely meet a wide variety of people. I actually enjoyed being in the boot camp a lot at IBM because I got to form these close connections to people and work closely with people who had different skill sets than I did. So that was kind of a nice way to meld this sort of smaller experience into a bigger company, and I know that's becoming more and more true amongst the big tech companies of the world. They tend to have like these smaller tech startup-like feel groups that are just like super agile and super creative, and then they're sort of parented or sheltered by this larger company. That's a really nice work environment. I enjoyed that when I was at IBM. Large company can be for you. Again, make sure that you figure out what you're working on, because there is definitely a chance that you might be joining a company for the name and then you end up working on a very monotonous sort of task, and you don't want that. Like, that is the last thing you want. You definitely want to be working on something creative and a place to really learn about things that you're interested in. I will say that a con of a big company is that they tend to be a little bit slower in both adaptation and also product life cycle. So because it's so big, there happens to be a lot more layers of politics. It's a little bit harder to just move fast and break things. You might be working in a legacy database. You could be working in legacy code for a smaller company too, but it's more likely that you're able to quickly move away from that with fewer people to juggle and to balance. Whereas in a larger company, it's going to take a lot longer to migrate to a new code base or to the latest tech or to even maybe the best and shiniest best practices. Now, this isn't necessarily true. A lot of large companies, like Facebook is a great example, are on the cutting edge of tech. Facebook created React. They started using it before anyone else, and they were really creative in that venture. So again, a lot of this depends on where you're working, but be aware that large companies tend to move slower than small companies, and that has been my experience. I feel like with small companies, we're able to ship quickly. You have more responsibility, so you know what you can control and what you should be putting out. You feel more responsibility because your teammates know that they're expecting something of you, and so things just tend to get built and shipped faster, which is a really fun environment to learn in and to work in. Now let's talk about product work versus agencies or consultancies. When you work on a product, and you can really dig into a specific knowledge of a product, like the user flow and whatever libraries are using to build that product, testing environments, and all sorts of things. This is a great place to be able to understand the nuances of development. I think more so than working in an agency, because you're spending more time on a product. And you want to always be building with best practices, because guess who's going to be working in that code base? You and your coworkers are. So you think about decisions in a more long-term way. You do tend to work with best practices and more modern technologies, just more often than you probably would if you're working at an agency where you're constantly changing what you're working on and constantly changing clients, because you might not have so much time to perfect things. Like, you know, it's like good enough, you're shipping it, you're sending it off to that client, and you won't have to touch it again. Whereas in a product, that's your baby. Like, you know, I mean, it's your baby with an agency too, but in a product, it's really something that you can't just let go of. It's going to be looking at you tomorrow. It's going to be looking at you in a month. Those bugs that you introduce are going to be looking at you in 3 months. You know, they're there. So you want to be definitely writing clean code. You'll probably become a more best practices kind of developer if you're working on a product, just more likely, because you do have more time to work on it, you do have more time to perfect it, and your bosses are probably giving you more time to focusing on things like performance and accessibility and writing clean architecture and making sure everything is in its right place. Products also tend to pay more, to be honest, because they tend to be making more of a solid stream of income. I could be totally wrong. There could be some agencies out there that get paid a lot of money, like that pay their engineers a lot of money. But just from my experience and knowing different people in the industry, I've seen product work pay higher salaries. So when it comes to agencies, you're gonna have a lot more variety in your work. You could have a lot more creative work. I know that agencies tend to have the opportunity to be really creative in some of the things they do, like landing pages. You could be working with campaigns. You could be working with like one-off things. You could even be working on a retainer with a client, but I definitely have seen agencies come out with a lot of really cool creative work. If you've ever seen like awards.com, that's awwards.com, a lot of the work on there that wins CSS awards, they tend to come from agencies because they're just like putting out a lot of work at a time. I think agencies are very fast-paced. They tend to be more fast-paced than product work is, because you do definitely have your deadlines and you have your timelines on things. But with agencies, it's like we have a deadline, we need design, we need development, we need to get it out before an event. There's a lot of different types of agencies. I'm pretty much thinking about creative digital agencies, but you will see a variety of work. You might even have the chance to write in a variety of languages if you are handed down a code base and you have to decipher and update it, which is an interesting challenge. You could have that challenge at a product company too. But with agencies, the biggest pro and con, depends on how you look at it, is that you get more fleeting code. So you are constantly learning new things, solving problems that are just varied in many, many ways, and pushing that out the door to your clients. Definitely approach your job search holistically, that's the word for it. There's so many different factors to determining a job, to determining where you want to work. But I hope that this video sort of helped you in terms of understanding some of the pros and cons about working at larger companies versus smaller companies, versus agencies versus product work. There's definitely so much more out there. If you have some advice personally, I'd love to see it in the comments below. If you think any of the things that I said were wrong, that's probably true. Make sure that you get your voice heard in the comments. Also, if you agree with some of the things that I said, leave comments. Let's make this a family. If you like this video, please hit thumbs up so other people can get it notified to them. Also hit subscribe if you enjoy this kind of video and like seeing these types of videos. I also do fashion videos and beauty videos on my channel. I just want to cover a range of topics for women in tech and just professional women in today's world. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.